Late summer in West London usually brought long evenings and slow walks along the water. The canals and footpaths near Hanwell were familiar to local families, a quiet place where cyclists passed dog walkers and people watched narrowboats drift by. On one afternoon in 2014, that familiar landscape became the last known setting for a 14-year-old girl named Alice Poppy Madeline Gross. Alice was born on February 14, 2000, in London, England. She lived in Hanwell with her parents, Rosalind and Jose, and her sister Nina. At home, Alice's world was filled with music and creativity. She loved art and design, and had an eye for details others missed. She sang, played the piano and violin, and often wrote and performed her own song. To the people closest to her, she was bright and expressive, a teenager still growing into herself. Behind that creativity, Alice carried private struggles. She had been diagnosed with anorexia and depression. Treatment efforts were already part of her life, and her family's attention to her well-being was constant. Even so, the routine of everyday life continued, and Alice still had habits that made her feel calm. One of those habits was walking. On August 28, 2014, at around 3:00 p.m., Alice left her home for one of her usual walks by the river. She told her parents she would be back by 6:00 p.m. It was not an unusual plan. She did this regularly, and she was known for keeping to her time. Her parents expected her return the way they had many times before. Later that day, Alice sent a message to her father, letting him know she was on her way home and would not be long. For a moment, it sounded like the afternoon would end normally. But as the minutes passed, the familiar rhythm did not return. Alice did not appear at the door. By 7:00 p.m., she still had not come home. Her parents felt the change immediately. The message had suggested she was close. Instead, silence took over. Her phone stopped ringing, and the sense of something being wrong became impossible to ignore. With Alice only 14 years old and vulnerable because of her health, the fear was sharp and specific. Her parents could not accept waiting until morning. They reported her missing straight away. Searches began in the area where Alice was expected to have walked. Family and friends moved along the paths and water lines, scanning the ground, calling her name, and looking for any sign of her. The first hours offered nothing. No phone contact, no clear witness who could say exactly what happened after the last message. The only certainty was that Alice had left home and had not returned. As the case escalated, attention focused on Alice's last confirmed movements. Witnesses began to describe seeing her along the Grand Union Canal. Those accounts led to the recovery of CCTV footage that aligned with the sightings and fixed Alice in time and place. Just before 4:00 p.m., Alice was captured on camera walking along the Grand Union Canal. She appeared alone, moving along the path the way she had many times before. Another sighting placed her at Brentford Lock, not far from where she lived. Then, at 4:26 p.m., she was seen again walking along the canal under a bridge at Trump's Way, heading back in the direction of her home in Hanwell. After that point, the trail went quiet. There were no more confirmed sightings, no more clear footage, no more simple answers. In the days that followed, Alice's family made repeated public appeals. They wanted Alice to know she was loved and needed at home. They also wanted anyone who had seen her or knew of any contact she might have had online or in person to come forward. The urgency was constant, shaped by the fear that time was slipping away. The investigation grew larger than a local missing child search. Scotland Yard's Homicide and Major Crime Command became involved, and the focus widened beyond the immediate neighborhood. The public response also swelled quickly. Social media filled with the words "Find Alice," and volunteers organized searches morning, noon, and night. Yellow ribbons appeared around town as a sign that the community was watching and waiting for her return. Days passed, and the lack of progress began to harden into dread. Then, on September 4, almost a week after Alice was last seen, a major discovery shifted the search. Alice's backpack was found along a footpath beside the River Brent. Inside were her belongings, including the shoes she had been wearing. The find was both a relief and a horror. It created a location to focus on, but it also suggested a deliberate break in the story. Alice's phone was not with the bag, and Alice herself was still missing. The discovery of the backpack changed the intensity of the operation. CCTV footage was released publicly, showing Alice's movements and highlighting the backpack and shoes. The message was clear. Someone had seen something. Someone might have noticed a bag by the water or a figure moving in the area. The case demanded every detail. Once his identity was attached to the footage, his movements became more disturbing. Cameras showed Zalkalns returning to the area where Alice had last been seen. He returned twice within a 12-hour period. He entered the area at 7:45 p.m. on the evening of August 28 and re-emerged at 8:50 p.m., wearing different clothes. He was seen buying beers in a shop at around 8:00 p.m. that same evening. Then he returned again one final time just before 7:00 a.m. on August 29. This was no longer a case of a girl who had simply wandered away. The pattern showed a man circling the same area, changing clothing and coming back again and again, as if he was checking something hidden and making sure it stayed concealed. A background check on Arnis Zalkalns revealed the kind of history that immediately reframed the entire search. In Latvia, he had been convicted of murder. He had beaten and stabbed his wife to death and buried her in a shallow grave. He served 7 years in a Latvian prison for that killing. After arriving in London, another violent incident followed. In 2009, 2 years after he arrived, Zalkalns sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl near the same canal route he later rode his bicycle down. The location was close, about 2 miles from where Alice would disappear years later. That case did not end in prosecution. The girl did not make a formal statement, and Zalkalns' past in Latvia had not been flagged through the procedures in place at the time. With Alice missing and Zalkalns now tied to her final route, the investigation shifted fully toward him. The search for a missing girl became the search for a man who had likely already killed her. Weeks went by. 4 weeks after Alice disappeared, a reconstruction of her final walk was carried out. Using an actress dressed in the same clothing, the goal was simple: to trigger memories, to pull forward the smallest overlooked detail, to remind the public of what they might have seen and dismissed. Every possible lead was pursued because the case had reached a point where time no longer felt like a neutral measure. It felt like an enemy. But Arnis Zalkalns was gone. He could not be found, and the fear grew that he had left the country. On September 30, 2014, 5 weeks after Alice was last seen, the investigation reached a devastating turning point. A search was carried out at the river. This time, the water gave up what it had held back. A body was recovered from the river. 1 day later, it was officially confirmed to be Alice Gross. The state of her body revealed the truth of what had happened. Alice was naked apart from a single sock. Her body was tied into a fetal position. She had been wrapped in bin bags. She had been weighed down by bricks and logs and tied to a bicycle wheel. She had not drifted into the river on her own. She had been forced into it and anchored there, held down so she would not rise to the surface. Further analysis showed she died from asphyxiation. The river was not the cause of death. It was the disposal site. Evidence at the scene connected directly to Arnis Zalkalns. A cigarette butt was found with his DNA on it. His DNA was also found on Alice's shoes inside her backpack, tying him to the belongings left behind on the river path. Searches extended to Zalkalns' property in Ealing. Underneath his patio, part of Alice's phone was found, specifically the back of her iPhone 4S. That detail filled in another gap in the timeline. Alice's phone had not simply vanished. It had been taken and brought to a place connected to Zalkalns. The story was now settled in its essential shape. On August 28, 2014, Alice walked along the Grand Union Canal and toward home. Arnis Zalkalns followed behind her on his bicycle. During the long gap where he disappeared from camera view, he attacked her. He sexually assaulted her, asphyxiated her, and took control of her belongings. He placed her backpack and shoes along the River Brent footpath to separate her from her identity and create confusion. Then he returned again and again to the area, changing clothes and checking the river site, trying to ensure her body stayed hidden. The method of concealment showed planning and strength. The bricks, logs, and bicycle wheel were not accidental objects. They were chosen to hold her down. The bin bags were chosen to wrap and control her remains. The single sock left on her body became a grim marker of how quickly her life had been stripped away. 4 days after Alice's body was found, Arnis Zalkalns was finally located. He had not fled the country. He had gone into hiding and then ended his own life. He committed suicide by hanging in a secluded wooded area of Boston Manor Park in Hounslow. The search ended with him dead, not in a courtroom, not answering questions, not facing sentencing. Even without a trial, the evidence left no meaningful doubt about responsibility. The DNA, the CCTV timeline, the repeated returns to the crime area, and the discovery of Alice's phone parts linked directly to Zalkalns. If he had been found alive, the case would have ended with a murder charge. On October 23, 2014, Alice Gross was laid to rest. Her family and community could finally begin the process of grieving a loss that had stretched for weeks in uncertainty, hope, and fear. The difference between searching for a missing child and burying her was a difference measured in devastation. After Alice's death, her family pushed for changes in how background checks were handled for people entering the United Kingdom. Policies and procedures around criminal record information were reviewed and changed. The number of staff working in the criminal record system increased, and requests for criminal record checks expanded. More foreign suspects were now being thoroughly checked, a shift shaped by the reality that Arnis Zalkalns' violent past had not been fully known when it should have been. Alice Gross remained what she had been before her name became a headline: a talented, creative, and vibrant young girl, a musician, a daughter and sister, a teenager who walked familiar paths near the water and believed she would be home soon. On August 28, 2014, her life ended in silence along the River Brent, taken by a man with a history of violence who found her in an ordinary place and turned it into a crime scene. Her story ended with her body pulled from the river, weighed down and hidden, and with her killer hanging in the woods, leaving behind evidence instead of answers.